nutrition, climate change, interlinked with the challenge and different recommendations that to our key multi-stakeholder policy nations have it in order to make action to reduce the famous GHG gases that we are here now discussing about this at the end. Through healthy and sustainable diets, we need to add this in our speeches, in our negotiations, and also in our actions with the different levels in policy or technical or research that we are involved. Healthy diets is a challenge in our planet, like you know. And when we talk about good nutrition, diet, and climate change, is absolutely necessary to mention the producers, the farmers, and technical experts, government plans, in order to lead in the same line, the opportunity to link with some of the key findings to integrate nutrition into public policy, with align into the climate agendas that our countries already have it. For example, the nationally determined contributions, the NDC, or national adaptation plans, or national strategy or regional strategy in order to transform and develop actions to guarantee healthy diets. We are involved to achieve food security also. Is climate change related food security, good nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. These challenges are what because the people eat, how the people obtain the food from farms to travel to our table. We need to think about it to have a balance of the power to know about food nutrition, but since the farm. This is a kind of synergy or has concrete plans in order to have the opportunity to approach the policymakers, the technical, the research, and to manage trade-offs to guarantee a healthy planet. That is so important. In the name of the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock in Costa Rica, thank you so much for that opportunity that we have it today in order to exchange in this side event that offer a high importance topic to consider not only in our healthy diets, also in our food production, because the way how we produce the food is so important to include in that challenge. So good nutrition and climate change balance with food production too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carla, for your energy and for your good introduction words. Can you hear me? Okay, I need to be very close to the microphone. Just for your information, there will be translation available, so in case you would need Arabic or French, that should be possible. So, thank you so much for your kind opening words, for your energy, and for linking agriculture, nutrition, diet with climate change. And that's exactly the objective of this event this afternoon. Yes, our current diets, they are not sustainable and they are not nourishing us, and they exacerbate global warming. While climate change also threatens the equitable achievement of good nutrition. This event examines food, nutrition, and climate change interlinked challenges, and it recommends key multi-stakeholder policy actions for reducing greenhouse gas emissions through healthy and sustainable diets. I believe we have a good and interesting lineup of speakers that look at these different challenges from different perspectives. We start with UN Environmental Program with Martina, who as part of their membership of UN Nutrition is delivering a discussion paper about the triple environmental crisis and the links with nutrition. Triple environmental crisis in the sense of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Then her presentation will be followed by an historical perspective by Professor Tim Benton, an historical perspective of how these interlinkages have been acknowledged, or maybe not, over time. And also he will bring us back into the current situation. Then these two presentations will be complemented by 2 panel discussions. One that gives the perspectives from governments and their actions and challenges and opportunities to work, for example, on NCDs, the inclusion of food and nutrition in NCDs, but also in national adaptation plans. And the other panel will look at, will hear the perspective of non-state actors and will give practical experiences. So that's the agenda for this afternoon. Martina, I'm happy to give the floor to you. Martina is the head of the Secretariat Climate and Clean Air Coalition of the United Nations UN Environmental Programme. Martina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Stineke, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for the introduction. I used to be very much involved in UN nutrition in my previous capacity, and it's a step back, a welcome step back into the past, not that long ago past. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, as you will agree, the situation we face today is critical. Billions of people around the world live with food insecurity, hunger, and malnutrition. At the same time, the triple planetary crisis, Stineke mentioned it already, of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution is worsening, threatening both human and planetary health with stark consequences for food systems, and with it, the most vulnerable being disproportionately affected. We absolutely need to better understand the interlinkages between nutrition and the environment to be able to address these crises. And we often hear that we need to make trade-offs, setting food security and environmental issues artificially apart. However, in a context where projections show that we are rather on a 2.8 than a 1.5 degree increased warming track, the impacts on our ecosystems and with it our food production systems are immense and really threatening food security. So that means we're well past being able to pick one over the other. What we really need to do is to work on the synergies, identify solutions and pathways that bring the nutrition and environmental communities together. And with this in mind, the UN Environment Programme set out to develop a discussion paper under the umbrella of UN Nutrition entitled Towards Positive Nutrition and Environment Interlinkages for People and the Planet, a mouthful. What better moment than this COP to share some of the paper's key findings, a little bit of a sneak preview before it's launched. As you heard, one aim of the paper is to foster a cross-disciplinary dialogue between those working on nutrition, agriculture, the environment, and other fields to build a common understanding of these interlinkages between nutrition and environmental challenges and how to really address them. By bringing together the experts and practitioners from these multiple fields, we set out to identify synergies and we developed joint policy options that can generate these co-benefits for people, the planet, and keep our temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. Now to some of the key messages. And at the nexus of these challenges are our diets. What we eat, how it's produced, how it travels from farm to plate, but also looking at the imbalances of power in our current food systems. From production to consumption, food systems are both key drivers and victims of the triple planetary crisis. And just to ask you, did you know that food systems account for up to 34% of the anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change? And that the share of methane emissions, greenhouse gas emission 84 times more potent than CO2 from agriculture sector, is as high as that of the fossil fuel sector? Methane, against the backdrop of air pollution, forms into tropospheric ozone, which is not only negatively impacting health, but also impacting crop productivity. And maybe to add a few other striking statistics. Pollution from food systems account for about 32% of terrestrial acidification and 78% of aquatic eutrophication. Land use change for agriculture and forestry accounts for nearly 60% of the loss in terrestrial mean species abundance. And in case you're not alarmed yet, Experts predict that these impacts will increase drastically in the coming decades due to increased demand for food, especially animal source food, if no action is taken. And you might find yourself asking, what's driving these numbers? Population growth, urbanization, economic growth, and the unequal distribution of power in food systems, fueling those dietary transitions towards diets in refined carbohydrates, fat, salt, ultra-processed foods, all bad for our health. These diets tend to have low nutritional quality and high environmental footprints. And these dietary and nutritional transitions occurred in the past in most higher income countries, and they're now occurring rapidly in low income and middle income countries. Mitigating climate change, protecting biodiversity and ecosystems, and reducing pollution are essential for supporting resilient food systems that can produce these nutritious foods that we need. So that means a shift towards diets that incorporate more nutritious foods with low environmental impacts, such as fruit, vegetable, legumes, nuts, seeds, small fish species, as well as underutilized indigenous foods, can support improved human and planetary health. Of course, dietary needs and preferences and environmental impacts vary widely across the globe. Addressing them, therefore, requires a context-specific solution that factors in equity considerations as well. And yes, positive change can start with the food you put on your plate. It's probably the one topic where each of us has such an immediate direct influence. And our paper describes various policy options to incentivize dietary shifts and support innovative, sustainable practices at every stage of food systems to support both nutrition and environmental and climate change goals. Now, a few examples. School meal programs can be adapted to provide nutritious foods with low environmental impacts. Food-based dietary guidelines can be created and adapted to include both nutritious goals and environmental sustainability. Existing technologies can improve food processing, especially for nutrient-dense foods with lower environmental impacts, and the list goes on. Policymakers and other food system actors should work collaboratively to develop a coherent and a bold mix of policies adapted to local context. To reach compromise and achieve mutually reinforcing goals, the nutrition and environmental communities must join hands and tackle these challenges together. And policies that provide co-benefits for nutrition and the environment are inherently cross-sectoral. And that means collaboration between multiple government ministries and subnational authorities, as well as other food system stakeholders, including civil society and obviously the private sector. To develop policies with co-benefits for nutrition and the environment, we really need to look at the empirical evidence of cost and benefits in each area. And the good news is that there are methods, such as true cost accounting and life cycle assessment, that have the potential to measure these interlinked nutritional and environmental impacts for food systems. And they require a bit more development and standardization, but these measures or methods can help decision makers quantitatively weigh policy options and manage and optimize the above-mentioned trade-offs that I'd want to get rid of to inform evidence-based policy solutions for nutrition and the environment. And COP27 is putting the green transition, notably concerning food, on the front line, but fast-tracking pledges on good food for health of people and the planet has to amount to more than words, including specific nutrition and sustainable diet targets in the national determined contributions is one way to scale up. And Carla has mentioned the strategies, the national strategies, obviously super important to give a very strong signal and drive the food systems change we need to see to meet the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martina. And I also like to thank you, your team, and also my team for the tremendous effort that went into this paper. I also want to highlight again that all our UN agency members, the member agencies of UN Nutrition, commented and looked at the paper, so we can really think and acknowledge that this is a UN nutrition paper combining the insights of and technical inputs of the several members. So I'm very happy we got to this stage. Thank you also for highlighting that the nutrition and environmental communities need to join hands and go for it together. And finally, I also think it's important to say that I'm sitting here as a nutritionist, and for once I'm not going to do nagging like you guys. You have to do better for nutrition, but this paper also calls for nutritionists to contribute to better environmental solutions. So it's not nutritionist nagging about environment. No, it's an offer from the nutrition world to environment. Like, if we, in our food-based dietary guidelines, include environmental targets as well, we can do good and better for both communities. So with that, I would like to hand the floor to Professor Tim Benton, who is the research coordinator of emerging risks and also the director of the Environment and Society program of the Chatham House. Professor Tim Benton, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I've been given the task of looking backwards, then looking forwards. And I know it might sound a little bit heretical, but the first question I want to pose is, what are food systems for? Now, many of us think food systems are about nutrition, nutritious, healthy diets, etc. Many of us as consumers might be interested in the cultural aspects and the flavour and all the rest of that. But primarily from politicians and market actors, the last 50 years, 60 years, has really been about making food systems profitable, driven by market growth, and nothing to do with feeding people in a sustainable and nutritious way. There has been a predominant ethos around making food ever more available and ever cheaper over the last 60 or so years, which I call the cheaper food paradigm, and primarily being driven by ag policy to intensify production, grow more, and trade policy to liberalise production in a global world. So of course that leads to globally connected food systems. What I eat might be grown somewhere else in the world with ingredients that might be spread across all the continents. But what this has resulted in is a concentration on very few crops grown at enormous scale. So 8 crops are responsible for about 75% of the world's calories. Those crops are grown in homogeneous landscapes with significant inputs, particularly of nutrients and pesticides, leading to biodiversity loss. We have land conversion for economic returns, and because so much of this food is grown from so few crops, predominantly calorie-rich crops, we have a food system that has led to dietary convergence on a global scale based around calories rather than nutrition. And of course, this leads to the increasing growth of obesity and non-communicable diseases. We have also grown to the extent that it makes it economically rational to throw food away, because for many people in the world it's cheap, and it's now cheap enough to feed grains to livestock. So on a global basis, more than 50% of grains go into livestock feed. In Europe, it's 60% of production, which means that meat is cheap. And with meat being cheap, more people eat it, and it also contributes to some of the ill health effects. Land use change and inputs and meat consumption all together drive climate change. And of course, climate change is threatening production and volatility of the production, driving things like extreme weather and drought and crop failure. And of course, all of this means that the more we produce, the more we feel threatened by climate change, the more yields are declining, the more the nutrient content of yields is declining, the more we say we have to grow more food. So we're in technically a Jevons paradox. Jevons, who was a coal economist in the Victorian age, pointed out that if you made coal-fired power stations more efficient, you would use less coal. Instead, you use more coal because you have more energy demand. And it's the same with food. The more we produce, the cheaper we make it, the more we find other uses for it, and the more we therefore consume it, waste it, and drive the planet into these interacting crises. So the food system as it stands, not only is it not serving people from a health perspective or food security perspective, it is systemically fragile. We found in 2007-8 and 2010-11 that weather crises can drive food prices, which can drive conflict, which can drive geopolitical issues. We found in 2022 the interaction between COVID, extreme weather, and the invasion of Ukraine has made the perfect storm of food price rises. And COVID, just as an aside, it was probably made more likely by climate change and land use change in terms of the ecological rewiring that comes. So not only is the food system not fit for purpose from a nutritional perspective, the food system is increasingly driving geopolitical tensions. As demand for goods from land exceeds the supply potential, particularly sustainably, it leads to increasing tensions over supply security. We see this writ large in the world at the moment, driving a decrease in cooperation, increasing competition, increasing contestation, and perhaps in years to come, an increasing in conflict over land for food and other resources. So coming to the end, food systems are central to these multiple challenges we have to face, but historically they've largely been absent from COP, and they're absent from the vast majority of the NDCs. We need to address food systems going beyond incremental improvements of agricultural productivity with reducing impacts to changing what we grow, how we grow it, where we grow it, and the amount we grow. We should be focusing on getting healthy, nutritious, and sustainable diets right, provided by markets that are properly structured to deliver better outcomes for people and the planet. So it's not just about food and health, this is about everything that matters to our future and to people's future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. I think that was a very clear message. You put it in a very clear historical perspective. And your closing words, this is about everything. It is about everything. So let's be very serious and work on it together as nutrition, environmental communities, but potentially even more other sectors to help us solve these tremendous challenges you visualized for us. So thanks. I'd like to invite now my panelists from Switzerland. Costa Rica is already sitting next to me, Ethiopia, and the municipality of Sao Paulo. So I think this is going to be a very interesting panel discussing the strategies and policy options for addressing the nutrition, environmental, and climate interlinkages. So we will have first a contribution from Christine Zundel, who is the Senior Policy Advisor from the Federal Office for Agriculture in Switzerland. She will be followed by Dr. Sisay Sinamo, who is the Senior Program Manager and focal point for the Sokoto Declaration in the Federal Program Delivery Unit in the Ministry of Health, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. We will hear again from Costa Rica, from Dr. Carla Mena Soto, who is also the agriculture negotiator for climate change at this COP from the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock. And finally, we will hear from Hugo Salomão Franca, who is from the Multilateral Affairs and City Networks Coordinator in São Paulo, Brazil. So, Christine, the floor is yours for about 4 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Stineke. Dear Excellencies, dear colleagues, can you hear me well? Should I speak louder? Okay, yes, better. Thanks also to the previous speakers for setting such an inspiring scene here. The question to Switzerland was whether we have any specific strategies in place to address the nutrient-environment nexus. And yes, we do. I would like to highlight 3 of them. We were actually one of the first countries that submitted a national pathway for food systems transformation in preparation of last year's UN Food Systems Summit in support of the 2030 Agenda. This pathway or roadmap aims to address the entire food value chain from production to consumption. It is based on Switzerland's Sustainable Development Strategy, which has a dedicated chapter on promoting the transformation of food systems towards more sustainability. This chapter has 4 measurable targets to be reached by 2030, all of them located at the nutrition environment nexus. These targets are 1, increasing to 1/3 the proportion of the Swiss population that nourishes itself in a healthy and balanced manner in line with our nutritional recommendations. Target number 2, we want to halve avoidable food losses. 3, decrease the carbon footprint from food consumption by 1/4 compared to 2020. And 4, increase by 1/3 the proportion of farms engaged in environment and animal-friendly production. With about 7.3 million tons of CO2 equivalent, agriculture currently accounts for 16% of total greenhouse gases of Switzerland. However, the figure for consumed food in Switzerland is more than double of that, almost 15 million tons of CO2 equivalent to be precise, mainly due to food imports. Given this strong nexus between food and climate, Switzerland's Sustainable Development Strategy foresees the development of a new climate strategy for the food and agriculture sector as part of its action plan 2021 to 2023. The climate strategy for food and agriculture 2050 addresses the entire food system, considering both the mitigation of greenhouse gases as well as the adaptation to climate change. The strategy has been reflected with a wide range of stakeholders from the food system, and it comes with measures. It is currently being finalized, and we hope we can publish it next year. One of the climate strategy for food and agriculture measures, as an example, is to strengthen the sustainability dimensions in the upcoming revision of the Swiss nutritional recommendations. Also, and this is the 3rd strategy we have, in July this year, the Swiss Federal Council, this is our executive body of our federal government, published a report called The Future Orientation of Agricultural Policy. And against what the title of the report would suggest, it actually adopts a food systems approach towards more sustainable agriculture production practices and also healthier and more environmental friendly consumption patterns. This should lead to 2/3 less greenhouse gas emissions of the food consumed by 2050 as compared to 2020. Measures to achieve this would still have to pass through parliamentary debates before eventually being translated into our agricultural policy. But the good news are that this new approach is broadly appreciated by the stakeholders. To sum up, Switzerland is working intensely on strategies and policies that address the nutrition environment nexus. The recent IPCC report highlights the great potential the measures of such strategies can have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And promoting healthier and more sustainable diets can make a major contribution towards net zero carbon emissions. Therefore, Switzerland is strongly committed to work towards embedding nutrition and food systems more strongly in the UNFCCC negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. I think that is very clear, very measurable targets, very clear and time-bound. And also thank you for really making it so important for Switzerland to include food and agriculture closer into the UNFCCC negotiations. That's what we need, that's what we are aiming at. I really like to hear from Ethiopia now, from Dr. Sisay Sinamo. Please tell us more about the Sokoto Declaration and your nutrition and environmental challenges and opportunities. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Stink. The government of... Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity. The government of Ethiopia has put various policies and strategies. The 10 years homegrown economic reform is built up on the green economy. And also we have a number of policies and strategies to improve food and nutrition. To mention some, the food and nutrition strategy, which is a 10 years investment plan, that is also a green part of the green economy. We have also the nutrition sensitive agriculture strategy, and also we have the other strategic objectives. So one of the implementation modality we are currently using for ending stunting is the Sakota Declaration. The Sakota Declaration is the Ethiopian government commitment that supports the implementation of the national nutrition strategy. And it brings 10 sectors together to address issues of stunting in the country. And through the work that we did in the past 5 years, as you can see in the slide, we have been able to reduce a 3 percentage point stunting reduction per year in a very difficult climate affected context in the northern part of the Ethiopia. So based on this learning, we have been able to avert over 109,000 children from stunting, and also we have been able to prevent over 1,000 children deaths in Tigray region as well as in Amhara region. So based on this learning, we are now scaling up to other regions across the country, from 40 districts to 240 districts across the country, using a multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder platform that works at all levels. So the key message from the Sakota Declaration program in terms of addressing the challenge of climate and also improving diet is, one is, multi-sectorality is really very critical. If we don't bring all the stakeholders together, addressing issues of healthy diet, food insecurity, and nutritional inadequacies is very difficult. The second learning is the government commitment and ownership and driving the initiative, building on the green initiative is very important, because in the Sakota Declaration program also, we have a lot of opportunities to plant trees, fruit trees specifically, and also implement a climate smart infrastructure interventions, both water interventions and agricultural interventions such as irrigation. I think this is something which Stink indicated that we also as a nutrition community, we need to contribute towards the climate change and reducing the impact of climate change by implementing climate resistant, promotion of climate resistant crops, and also promoting climate smart infrastructures, and also bringing all the relevant sectors together that contributes towards improved nutritional outcome. And as I conclude, this achievement that we have achieved in the past 5 years is now being scaled up in 240 additional districts. One of the key contributors is improved dietary diversity. I think to achieve improved dietary diversity in a very climate affected context is implementing climate smart interventions and also climate resistant nutrient dense crops promotion is really critical. As this crop is an implementation crop, implementing this kind of interventions could also contribute towards the impact of the climate change. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Another very clear exhibition of how Ethiopia is dealing with both climate change from the adaptation point of view and the mitigation point of view by the way you promote agriculture, and at the same time being able to reduce levels of malnutrition. What also struck my attention sorry about that. What also struck my attention is that you, apart from the scaling up you mentioned, and of course the multisectorality, you mentioned at all levels. So that is important. You go from national level to local level and to village level, and the other way. You know, it's really connected. So that brings me to, in fact, the last speaker on this panel, Mr. Hugo Salamão Franca from the city of São Paulo, to bring in the city perspective. So not national, but rather city perspective. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, first I'd like to thank UNEP, the governments of Costa Rica and Switzerland for the invitation. And as the only representative of a subnational government in this panel, in the name of São Paulo, I appreciate the space and the recognition, knowing the context and also the fundamental role that urban centers have in fulfilling the NDCs, the national determined contributions, and also reaching the Paris Agreement. I'll first start talking about CONSEA, the National Council for Food Security, created in 1993 in Brazil, to articulate the three levels of government: municipal, state, and federal, alongside with civil society, to revise the existing federal programs, but also elaborate the plan against hunger and poverty. Unfortunately, over the last few years, under Bolsonaro's regime, these important governance mechanisms lost strength and autonomy, barely ending its activities. As you may know, in 2014, Brazil left the World Hunger Map, according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, and we had huge advances in the fight against hunger and poverty, with the prioritization of the food and nutritional security agenda starting in 2003 with Lula's presidency, highlighting the Zero Hunger program, the recreation of CONSEA, and policies of social protection and promotion of agriculture production. Just a minute. Well, yes, well, however, Brazil today is back on the hunger map with 33 million people suffering from hunger and 116 million in food insecurity. And climate change has impacts in food systems at different levels, and sustainable and resilience initiatives coupled with climate-smart agriculture are needed to ensure sustainable diets that are diverse, nutritious, and better aligned with contextual ecosystem functions and environmental conservation. As a megacity with also country-like features, São Paulo has 20 million inhabitants in the city and 23 million in the metropolitan region. We also face great challenges. Our city has 48% of green coverage and 30% of rural areas. For us, it's of great importance to foster sustainable practices to enhance agriculture in our city. Projects such as Connect the Dots and Sampa Plus Rural are shifting the way food is produced in our city. Connect the Dots aims to foster sustainable development in rural areas by enhancing local agriculture with organic and agroecological practices. We use technology as a tool for integrating and coordinating existing initiatives and information, fostering the local agriculture value chain. And by connecting the productive potential of the rural territory to the dynamics of the largest Brazilian urban economy, we create sustainable links so that citizens and producers can take advantage of this. And by encouraging a consistent green economy, we prevent arable areas from being taken over by urbanization and jeopardizing also the city's water security. And concluding, I would also like to emphasize three key topics on the agenda, and mainly to this COP27: climate justice, losses and damages, and common but differentiated responsibilities. Only when the largest emitters truly understand and and accept the responsibility for the current scenario and assertively engage and finance new perspectives for the future, we will have any chance of moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing the tremendous challenges of a mega city with us, and also congratulating São Paulo for already how you've been able to shift production patterns to more sustainable ones, and also by nurturing food consumption patterns. So thanks a lot for that. And I'm afraid I need to apologize because I said you were going to be the last speaker, but of course you're not the last speaker. We're going back to Costa Rica and to hear from Carla again, and how you've been able to integrate NDCs in your, nutrition and food systems in your current NDCs. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So, in my country, when we start to talk about strategies and policy options to take care about nutrition, environment, agriculture, climate linkings, we start so many years ago when we start to talk about how to forest or to preserve our forests that we already have it in our country. So historically, we have the commitment of environmental issues to take care and to promote in our people, since children, young people, policymakers, and producers, that issue in our different actions. I would like to mention that Costa Rica submitted the updated NDC in the last December 2020, and is an NDC so particular, but for us is so great because include agricultural, environmental, and food nutrition topics in order to implement under public policy, integrate different authorities in my country, environmental, agriculture, and of course, health ministries are so important. And now we are including or integrated also the commerce and technology authorities, and also because are so important for us, and also the taxes topic, because my country is really high-level taxes, and we need to link in it. So NDC for us was so, we start to join it in the same time that we start with our national decarbonization plan. What that means? Because we are so engaged in order to mitigate and adaptate both our food systems, our different way to produce our food. And because we start with this plan, including environmental and agriculture topics, to implement the first level analysis of cost, to how to value that NDC for us, how the value of that NDC, what is the cost associated to each line of the action proposed in the NDC, in order to establish different plans to implement through different support that we start to receive it, in focusing in adaptation, nature-based solutions, and our first step on MRV, that it means monitoring, report, and verification, and also with communication campaigns, because we need policymakers, but we need producers, and also we need the consumers. The people that go to the supermarket, the people that is in the educational level, we have to implement that team together in order to start to work with our NDC. But I would like to tell you three things so important how we are going to implement policy options or strategies. First of all, is food guidance. Guides according to different regions in our country. We start with 2 regions in order to promote in our schools and high school with children and young people the value and the importance of their food that are producing in their areas, in order to big value, to give value to the producer, the products that they already have it, and in different territories, and the consumption of food that are so traditional in the regions. We start with 2 regions in order to value the importance of the nutritional facts and also the reduction of emission and food security topics. Start to teach them with that guidance to the different level of the young people and kids in their educational level. The second one, strategy, I don't know if you hear it, but we started with the first NAMA a couple of years ago, like 10 years ago, NAMA, that means national actions to mitigate it, the different areas. So we started with our first national tool in coffee and livestock in order to reduce emissions. Why? Because coffee and livestock are the most important activity in our GHG emission inventory in order to implement sustainable practices, good practices, since the food production system and how include also the industry to add value to the whole line in the way to produce. So NAMA, coffee and livestock NAMA give us lessons not only to good practices, but now policy strategies. Because in our country also we have bananas and we have also rice and sugarcane that are so important to our economic development. So we are implementing with that sectors that good practices in order to reduce and adaptate and make policy to teach to the producers how to produce in a sustainable way that products. So, and another thing so important is our agenda in agro-environmental topics. I think it's a very complex sometimes to have authorities from agriculture and environmental topics to talk together about how to produce in a sustainable way. So in Costa Rica, we are trying, and we started with our agenda that we call agro-environmental agenda in order to have our both authorities, environmental and agriculture, talking about, of course, policy and mechanism, financial mechanism in order to implement that good practices that I mentioned in NAMAS, and how that agenda give us the opportunity to adaptate our system, a production system, and also how to adaptate our policy and how adaptate our way to implement the different actions that we are talking now here in that event. Climate change is so important, but food nutrition too, and how make a balance with this. So our environmental agenda is a big issue. We are starting to implement, follow our challenge with the NDC, and for us it's a great opportunity for our country. So all of this is 3 examples under policy decisions. That is so important too, in order to, if each change government, we can continue and don't stop.
Thanks to all speakers in the panel, and also thanks to all for sticking to time. I think, again, very concrete contributions, how you manage in Costa Rica, and again, highlighting the multisectorality that all the other panelists also emphasized, the need to work hand in hand in order to be able to do a concrete planning that has the desired outcomes. If you just focus on one aspect, it's just simply not going to work. And you made that very, very clear, even though you need to take care of the trade-offs and you need to balance those. So great. We do have a bit of time for some questions from the audience. So the floor is open. Anyone? I think we have heard quite, I see 2 ladies in the back, and I have 2 microphones here, so I don't know if someone from the technicians can help me. But in the meantime, come here.
Hello? Okay. Hi. Thank you so much, all the panelists and all the information. Just a quick question. I really like hearing the nexus, especially in Costa Rica, I think also mentioned in Brazil, with health, agriculture and environment, and working with those ministries. And I'm just wondering, from the perspective of blue and aquatic foods, how much are we integrating that into this nutrition conversation, as it also has a big impact also on how we're delivering on NDCs and strategies? Thank you.
That's great.
Let's take
question.
the second question, and then
Okay.
and then we can go back to the panel.
Sure. Ooh, can you hear me? Hi, I'm Kelly Dent from World Animal Protection. Thank you for the presentation. That was fantastic. And obviously we're seeing a lot at COP here about starting to focus on food systems, which I think is really good, especially after the AR6 report that came out. My question to the panel is, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on how you bring some of these initiatives that you've been talking about at the national level, how you bring it into the negotiations and in not only to the agriculture part of the negotiations, but to the whole negotiations, because many of you have spoken about the interaction between the different areas. And I think this, this is something we didn't see a while ago in the UNFCCC, is this interrelationship between the different areas. So I'd like to hear your comment on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So let's go back to the panel, and maybe Christine, if you would like to take it first, because I'm afraid we are losing you. So if you want to take a first go, and then we go to Carla.
Okay, thank you very much, Tineke. Thanks for the two very interesting questions. Maybe on the first one, if I got it correctly, it was like how we reflect the imported food in our reduction targets, in our strategies at the national level. And yes, we do reflect or integrate imported foods in our targets. We have a target on the carbon footprint of consumed food. And in Switzerland, this means 50% of the food is domestically grown, 50% is imported. So the imported food is also part of our reduction target. Then on the other question on how can we bring our national strategies into the negotiations, well, here I have to be careful not to be too chatty. It's difficult. Us, the negotiators, we come from so different contexts with challenges that are so different that it's very difficult to be progressive. And I think maybe of course, we as Switzerland, we try very hard, but we should be careful not to be too ambitious and not to lose many countries, because for many the concept of food systems, or now of including nutrition in the talks, are very far-fetched concepts, and I think we have to convince party representatives first that these new concepts bring a lot of added value also for their national context. Thank you.
Carla, you want to give it a try?
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to answer the two questions first. Well, for us, I forgot to tell for us in the agriculture minister include the areas of oceans and fisheries also. So they are included in our policy strategy in the climate change. Now, in that moment in my country, ocean is so important because we have both oceans and we have a big group of fisheries producers, and we are working with them with policy law and given some policy strategies in order to produce and to obtain alternatives to produce or to have own sustainable way to do their activity. Yes, this is a really important issue in our country. So thank you for that question. That I already included, but listen, it's not easy to have this, to have our NAMA or our different environmental service that we already have it since many years ago. It's not easy. We have many challenges yet. So it's a small country, but our politicians' environment sometimes takes another vote or maybe. So for that reason, this agenda, agro-environmental agenda, is so important for us to include everything: water, soil, fisheries, forests. So we are working together. It's not easy, it's complex, so we are starting yet. So with the second question, yes, I agree with my colleague here. Okay. With my second question, it's true, my colleague said, but just one thing. Here we are like with our delegations too. Each country have their own delegation, not only policy or public sector people, also NGOs or civil society. So, in my opinion, how each country can be together working on talking with that group, not only policy or public policy or public sector, how to include gender, civil society, in order to exchange with them our results or our conclusion, our different topics that she mentioned. It's true, it's not easy. But if you share with them, not by media or newspaper, just to talk with them directly for the people we are involved, in order to give them conclusions, the real conclusions that already have it inside. So make together, work together, and exchange knowledge directly with the people that are negotiating. This is so important.
Thank you so much. I'd like to check if my other panelists would like to come in very briefly. You want to come in briefly? Yes, please. And then I'll hand the floor to Tim.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, maybe briefly on the food system. I think the various food system stakeholders are already on the table on the climate change negotiation. But the most important thing is how do they perceive the key challenges of the food system to bring them on the table. Because the agriculture sector, the transport sector, the industry sector, they are already on the table. But bringing the food system perspective, the healthy diet perspective is the most important thing that we also need to educate at country level for those issues to be on the table. Thank you.
I'm obviously not a member of a party, but I'm doing a lot of work with parties. One of the things that strikes me about things like COP is that they're often quite competitive for leadership. And last year at COP26, there was a small group of countries coming together to create a high ambition coalition to go beyond oil and gas, chaired by Costa Rica and Denmark at the time. And I think what is becoming evident at the moment is that food systems are becoming very obvious at COP27, perhaps more obvious at COP28, and the political utility for countries looking to see other countries also tackling the challenges becomes really important. So that kind of government to government, seeing what others are doing, seeing that other countries are beating them at doing better, is also an informal way by which it can drive forward some of the negotiating positions within the COP, because of countries kind of socializing some of the issues together. So I'm very keen on developing a high ambition coalition of countries who say, yes, we recognize what a food system transformation is to deliver health, environmental and people outcomes, and want to get together to make sure that it becomes part of the negotiations rather than just being left on the sidelines.
Thank you for bringing those perspectives, including the political economy, to the table. So this has been good. I hope we will have another opportunity for questions with the audience, with you. But for now, I'd like to invite my two other panelists, Jean-Baptiste Buffet and also Dorrit Adler, to come up to the stage. Thank you. So this second panel we'll basically look at the same topic, but more from a non-state actor perspective. So we'll have two speakers, and potentially there will be more people also in the room. And first we will have Jean-Baptiste Buffet, who is the head of policy and advocacy of UCLG. And I hope you will be, oh, you're the other side. I hope you will be able to say something about multi-level governance. So the floor is yours. You have about 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Executive Secretary. Well, yes, I'm from UCLG, United Cities and Local Governments. This is the largest network of cities and regions around the world. We gather 250,000 cities and regions, and we've been working lately on exactly connecting food security and climate change, but with a very particular concept, which is localizing food systems. So how do we localize governance around food systems? And I would just like to share 3 very short messages around this. The first one is that the role and competencies and capacities of local authorities in this has often been overlooked. The capacities, the competencies of local authorities are not enough recognized, are not enough supported, and sometimes in many countries, cities and regions have had to bypass the legal framework that they were constrained to initially to be able to serve the communities, because that's the final point, is being the closest level of governance to the people. And sometimes they have had to go beyond the legal framework to be able to do so. So this is this change of narrative that we've been trying to promote. Not cities and regions as consumers of food, and this was the case for so many decades, and perhaps it was the case, but now cities and regions as catalytic actors and coordinators between different levels of governance. That's my first message. The first one, and it's looking at this with a territorial lens. So looking at this not only as being one just governance actor, but linking with the rural communities. So when we talk about multi-level governance, it's not only with national governments, but looking at, and especially with food, how we link up with the rural communities and the farmers and the CSOs on the ground with the communities, and linking up with the provincial governments, with the regions, and with the states. So looking at this very role of local governments as coordinator within the whole system. And third, we've been working lately, and this is a notion that we've been deepening, is the notion of right to food. So we're working on this concept of food citizenship together with the civil society and this new connection that we have with NGOs. One example with this, and I will end it here, is we have so many concrete case studies from provincial governments, but from municipalities, schools that have put in place the 0 kilometer for canteens, for students, for pupils, to make sure that even at the very local level in schools, the products come from less than 1 kilometer from around the school. So I leave it here for now. But yes, please continue to support local governments around the world, and please count on us to continue working on those linkages. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and we take your offer for support, of course. Yeah, thank you for bringing in the governance aspect, and specifically the territorial aspect, because it nicely links it back to where Carla opened with the context. We need context-specific solutions, and that's so closely linked also to the territorial approaches and lens. And of course, thank you for highlighting the right to food. We should never ever forget that everyone has right to adequate food. With that, I would like to move to Dorit Adler, who is the president of the Israeli Forum for Sustainable Nutrition. You have the floor.
Okay, now. Thank you for a very moving session, very important one. There is no question that our food system is broken in Israel as well. We have the whole syndemic of obesity, diabetes, nutrition insecurity, and of course, a climate crisis, as we are not far away from here as a hotspot. As the United General Secretary mentioned, without transformation in food systems, we will not achieve any of the 17 SDGs. In Israel, we lead some changes, like the red front of PEC, mandatory labeling, and sugary beverages that has came into call on 2022. Unfortunately, it might be regressed with the new government coming in. We also map the different regulations relating the food systems, and we find many, many contradicting regulations. For example, Israel has committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and on the other hand, took off the importing tax on red meat, even though Israel is 4th in the world in meat consumption, 4th in the world. And we're leading also in diabetes and so on. So we see there is a big problem. And as Professor Tim Benton mentioned, what is the purpose of food systems? And we would like to call you to join us. We are the Israeli Forum for Sustainable Nutrition, together with our presidents, Israeli president, climate forum, that we are calling for a compass for food systems, which is based on healthy, sustainable food basket, which is basic foods, culturally adapted, that should be the compass for any regulation around food systems. We have it in field of building, that you cannot build neighborhood without relating and testing what is the results of such a building on the environment. We would like to have the same for food systems. And when we look about what kind of food should we grow? And as Professor Tim Benton mentioned, we are focusing on just earning more, yes, and lowering the prices. And this is catastrophe. So we think if all nations come together, and the United Nations should lead to say it should be part of the civil right and the right to food, that the healthy, sustainable, basic food basket, culturally and geographically adapted, should be the basis for any kind of policy. Otherwise, we will have endless policies, and all of them will lead us to more deterioration. So thank you so much for letting us join this panel.
Thank you, Dorit, for these very concrete examples, and also for calling on the UN to be, in fact, a thought leader and to set the frame for collaboration, but also for policy. So thank you very much for that. So I'd like to move back to you, the audience, and I'd like to know if there's anyone in the room who'd like to also speak up or ask a question. If not, I'll just point out to colleagues in the room. I know there's someone who's eager to speak, so I don't know, Peter from ICLEI, if you would like to take a few moments to make your point. Is there a microphone?
Thank you. I'm Peter from a city network called ICLEI. I really liked what Tim Benton said. It's about everything. Because indeed, the night before coming to here, to the COP27, my 10-year-old son told me in the bed, "But Dad, why do you go to the climate conference if you work on food?" And I think this narrative is really not so clear yet, and it's amazing to have in a panel like Carla, Ursula, Cisse, 3 countries that link food and climate. And I couldn't also agree more than with what Jean-Baptiste said, we are both working with cities and local governments, that in the NDCs, cities and local governments should be seen as accelerators for system change and implementation on the ground. I brought 3 public plates, because that's my point. Public plates stand for public procurement. The typical public purchasing of food, like in schools, kindergartens, elderly homes, hospitals. So you can either have zero food, and that means, for instance, typical schools where there is no meal. Because my point is that if you're a policymaker, particularly school meals, and it was mentioned several times, is such a low-hanging fruit where you can combine the healthy people with the healthy landscapes and the healthy environment. But then, and the World Food Programme can tell you the figures, the drastic figures, like during COVID when there was no food in many schools. Then the second public plate is when there is food. It can be tagine, it can be ratatouille or Swedish meatballs. And this is indeed, it's an equitable access to food for all children or young people that go to school, and most, if not all children, go to school. But if you really want to do the magic, and I think this is when Tim Benton says it's about everything, that's when you apply this, the universal language, the Sustainable Development Goals, into the food procurement, into the school meals. That's when you look at minimum standards, like how much of this food comes from small farmers. Like, for instance, in Brazil, 30% must come from small farmers. Or that we did in the podcast, you can hear it in the power of the public plate. It's on Spotify and so on. Where, for instance, in Kenya, lots of food came actually from biodiverse plants, crops that were traditional. And that was really amazing, because it turned out that these crops were much more nutritious than the usually imposed ones, these few ones that Tim mentioned. And overall, it saved even money to the public. But then it's also about health. It's about stunting, but it's also, for instance, in Europe, on the other hand, it's obesity, as the World Health Organization turned out, the biggest problem. So how do you link it to health? But then it's also about food education. I'm always impressed that, for instance, in Europe, there's only Finland who has it in the curriculum. How come children don't learn about what healthy food is and cooking as a standard curriculum? And there's many other things. So if you do it the smart way, as a policymakers, try to combine school meals, food procurement with the Sustainable Development Goals. It's such a low-hanging fruit. Small plate, big impact. Thank you.
One of the best.
Thank you. Challenge.
Yes, but
yeah, we are.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I had to be, I had to urge you to stop. I'd like to know if there's another question in the room. Yes.
Thank you very much. Leslie Mitchell, Forum for the Future. I'm going to take the opportunity of perhaps invoking the Chatham House rule here of not attributing necessarily what you say so that you can speak freely. I have a question for you as a panel and for Tim as well. We're really good at making the case in food systems sectors that this really matters and this needs to be on the agenda for the UNFCCC. But we clearly haven't made the case yet to the UNFCCC and to the parties to convince them. So my question to you is, if you got stuck in an elevator for 3 minutes, do your elevator pitch. What are the things that you would say to those delegates, perhaps the most skeptical ones, about why they must and should include food and agriculture in the climate policies? And secondly, what do they need to put in the policies? Where? What do they need to actually enact?
Thank you. I'm just checking in the room if there's someone else. Otherwise, I'll go to the panelists and challenge them for the elevator pitch. Who want to go first?
Okay.
You look ready?
I would exactly tell them what we've been pitching right now in those 3 minutes. And actually, this is the exact purpose of this room. We also have parties in this room. We also have member states. And that's the exact purpose of building those coalitions, like the Urban Food Security Coalition that brings as well and aims at discussing with beyond the stakeholders, but aiming at putting these advocacy lines towards national governments. I don't think we need to complexify so much our narrative, but just makes it very clear from the concrete examples what works and what can be scaled up and replicated. I don't think this is way more complicated than that from our perspective.
Dorit?
Yes, I would say that there are some leaders in the world that are not sleeping, thinking where they will feed their people from. And I think everyone should be worried about that. We're on the verge of an immense crisis, food crisis, as well as other crises, yes, biodiversity and so on. And when food is not there, everything collapses. So I think we are now almost like in the Titanic, blind, and we really have to collaborate, all of us. It's not a matter of right or left or anything. It's a matter that we have to transform our food system to feed the world population. It's simply as that. And every country should be worried about that. And we have to find ways to grow what we can in our areas and to make sure we can export and import things that will be available for the whole world population. We're in this boat all together.
Thank you. Tim, I think the question was also addressed to you, so make it a very low building, short elevator pitch.
Well, it's a good question, and I think I'm having lots of conversations, bilaterals, with governments at the moment, and again, I would approach this from a political economy perspective in the sense of almost everybody can understand that food systems need to be transformed, but most governments do not have a mechanism for working across government in a systemic way. And it's nice to hear that Costa Rica is making progress on this. But with climate change, it's relatively straightforward because there's a link between climate change and energy, and there's a major axis. With food, it's agriculture, it's environment, it's climate, it's trade, it's nutrition and health. And having conversations at this COP, I can easily find somebody who understands the agriculture sector. There are very few people and very few in negotiating teams that understand the breadth, and very few government officials, ministries, own the issue of food systems, and so there isn't an easy political inroad. I was at a meeting yesterday where everybody was saying, yes, we need food system transformation, and every time I talked to somebody about what they meant something completely different, because it's such a complex and contested space that without that coordination across, there isn't a vision for what a transformed food system would look like. So two political economy things, but I think over the last few years we have made the case, and food systems are the next big thing after energy systems, and we're well on the way to energy systems. So I think food will become more prominent, and governments will have to solve this issue of who owns food, because it's not just agriculture.
Thank you so much. I also am aware of one more speaker who is online and who is also eager to bring in a very short contribution. So I'm not sure if the technicians can bring up the speaker. We have Dr. Michael Bitterman, who is the CEO and co-founder of the Natural Step in Israel. I hope you are there, Dr. Bitterman. Yes, you have the floor. Please, you can speak for 2 minutes.
Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
I can't hear you. So if you raise your hand, I will assume you hear me. Okay. So thank you very much. We at the Natural Step Israel are focusing on the resiliency of food system, and in specific on food waste, since 2013. And our first mission was to change and shift the discourse from a discourse that is talking about a social problem and how food waste is part of a welfare problem and feeding starving people and rescuing food, into a wider discussion and a much more comprehensive, saying that food waste is a major environmental problem and it's a national and a personal economic one. And when we were able to do that, and I think that after 9 years we see a shift in that discourse, we can see much more upstream solutions and more people understanding that the problem is part of their role and they need to be part of it. And I will share a bit of our experience. One, we understood we need to bring everyone into the room. So we conducted the Sustainability Transition Lab regarding food waste. And for more than 2 years, we sat with more than 40 partners representing more than 10 stakeholders from academia, national government, local government, producers, agriculture, and so on, in order to really understand the complex issue of food waste and what kind of solutions we have, and of course, the conflict of interests. So we will be able to invest in the right solutions. And since there, we are investing in pincer movement actions. We're working on national government policies, on the public awareness, and on business. And I will say 4 short comments. One, on terms of the public, is a lot of work in raising the awareness, but even more importantly, giving alternatives. What can a household change in order to really change their actions? And we have established a national day on the 12th of March, much influenced by the SDG 12.3 target on food waste. We have coined a term called Simbuz. Anyone who knows Hebrew can understand. So it's something that we see people use more and more in order to talk about this issue. And we have a Love Food Not Waste internet website that really outreaches with alternatives. The second is working on market failures. We have not yet succeeded, but I'm totally devoted that we will succeed in implementing dynamic pricing and letting people to buy lower priced products that are almost expired and by their date and not been thrown away. The third is to involve all policies on the national level and the 5 different ministries, understanding now that they need to put their emphasis, and each one is on a different phase of the value chain, or value chain of food. And the last one I would say is about technologies. Israel is known to be the startup nation and a lot of food tech, but at the same time, we don't have enough technologies to really solve food waste. So we're investing a lot in telling people, come on board, give us technologies that could help us when no other means can help us in reducing the food waste. So yes, food waste is a huge element in a nutritious, healthy, and a corrected food system. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was yet another very clear example, and that could have been another elevator pitch as one of the solutions. And I'd like the audience to bringing up the concept of the elevator pitch, because we all need to practice this better. We know food systems contribute to greenhouse gas emissions for about 1/3 of the total. So it is an important aspect, and we should be able to bring that message to the forefront. And that's, of course, it's problematic. But then what we have heard today from the panelists and from the keynote speakers is that we do have enough knowledge how to tackle these challenges, both from a climate perspective and from a food, health, and nutrition and dietary perspective. We do know what to do. We have tools, we have measurements. Okay, we need better. Of course, we always need better, but we have very concrete tools. The food-based dietary guidelines were mentioned. Solutions for food losses and waste were mentioned. School food and nutrition programs were mentioned. Taxes and subsidies were mentioned. The political economy was mentioned. The multi-level governance was mentioned. So we do have the knowledge. We do have the tools available in order to tackle the solution. So Yes, of course, there is politics to it, but I think if we all go out and meet the negotiators and help them realize that the solution is there, as long as we, as people, as persons, can connect, bring the relevant people to the room, bring the nutrition and the environmental people in one room, one negotiation room with the proper solutions. But do not forget about the additional sectors that are out there as well, because we are all connected, and that's something we should definitely not forget. I also would like to make one more point here before we close this session. The consumers, they were mentioned every now and then as we should not forget about the consumers, and we should not forget about the consumers. It's very essential. We speak about producers, we speak about sustainable production, we speak about small-scale producers, which is extremely important, but if we are not able to connect the small-scale producers with the consumers in cities or in urban rural areas, it's not going to work either. So we have to bring those relevant people into the room. Linked to producers and consumers, what was mentioned also today in this panel several times is the right to food. And I'd like to close with the right to adequate food. In this context of climate change, in this context of conflicts, in this context of rising prices, both of food, dietary needs, but also other basic commodities like energy to warm our houses, to be able to cook our food, it's not going to work. So let's realize that we all have the right to adequate food, and these rights are connected to other rights, right to health, right to a safe environment, and all other human rights. So let's keep that in mind, and that should be our energizer to move forward, even in this COP that's so hectic. It's simple, we have right to food. So I'd like to close here, and just one more word before we really close. I'd like to really thank my co-organizers, who are the governments of Costa Rica, the government of Switzerland, and I'm afraid she had go to another event already. Dorit here, Peter, UCLG, Chatham House, UN Environment, Martina Otto also already had to leave, and then finally my colleagues in the UN Nutrition Secretariat. So a big thank you to all of you and us who made this event a possibility. So thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your stay in Sharm, and have a very successful negotiations and side events wherever you're going later this afternoon. Thank you so much.